Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lisa, and if you haven't seen any of my other posts, any of my other channel episodes, I'll give you a quick introduction. I am living in Seoul, South Korea with my family. We've been here for 20 months, give or take, and I just announced on my last episode, I really need to come up with a better name for these. I just announced on my last video that I am pregnant. Right now I am currently 6 months pregnant and I am due to give birth in July. Right now it is end of March. So I just wanted to give a quick kind of story. Story sounds like the wrong word. I had an incident regarding my pregnancy last week that I wanted to talk about because it's exactly the kind of thing that I would want to hear from someone else who is experiencing going through pregnancy in a foreign country, and in particular Seoul, because that's where I live. So I thought I would give you guys just a quick couple-minute overview of what went on with me. I had a very busy work week. It was kind of a crazy week. And in and amongst all of that, I contracted a bacterial upper respiratory infection. I didn't know that was what it was at the time because I all I had was a fever and very chills, very achy. It to me seemed like the flu. I had already gotten my flu shot and we're kind of out of flu season, so it didn't really make sense. Plus, I didn't know anyone else that had the flu. But I'd also been in contact with a lot of people who'd come from the States, so it was really difficult to say whether or not it was something like that, like a virus. So we made the decision after taking my temperature to let my doctor know. We don't have my doctor's phone number. We don't even have a number for her office at all. That's one of the things here that's interesting. So without that, all I had was an email address from when she had emailed me some test results from a couple months ago. So I told my husband to send her an email and see what she had to say about it. And she said, due to having a fever, my fever was 102.2, that I needed to come in and be checked out. So here's the interesting thing about Korean hospitals, or at least Severance, where I go, is that, and sorry, I'm so out of breath. It kind of comes with the territory of having an upper respiratory infection and being pregnant, and it being a terrible pollution day outside today. You don't go, well, in Korea, at Severance at least, I can't speak for other hospitals, but my experience was that if you are pregnant, you are only cared for by, regardless of your ailment, you're only cared for by doctors and nurses who are trained with maternity issues. So, in the case of Severance Hospital, you go to the delivery room. If you have really anything, I'm sure that there are limits to that. Like if you cut off a finger, I'm pretty sure you'd still go to the emergency room. But in pretty much any other case, you go to the delivery room, which is so interesting because that's not something that we would ever do in the States. So we got to find out where that is, which was good practice for us anyway. It turns out that it's not in the main hospital area where we would typically go for our appointments. It was in this annex hospital called the Children's Hospital, which is really good to know because that's where I'll be going when I actually deliver this baby. So we finally make it there. We get through all the kind of various people and make it up to the 6th floor, which is where the delivery room is. My doctor had already called ahead, told them that I was coming and to expect me. And of course, because it's Korea, my husband was immediately told to go find himself elsewhere, that he was not permitted, not encouraged to stay with me, which was fine. I was okay. I had taken some Tylenol before I got there, so I was actually okay to go forward on my own. So there are private rooms along the delivery room area. I didn't really get to take too much of a look because I really wasn't feeling well at all. But I could hear people delivering babies. Actually, I couldn't really hear the women. I could only hear the babies crying. So I knew that there was that kind of thing going on. But where they took me was actually this kind of open bay of probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 regular size hospital beds, all in a row, no separate rooms, just all in a row. And they were all open. There was nobody else in there. So they put me in the last one, which was the most private, which was nice, and shut the curtain. And you really didn't feel like you were in an open bay at all. It felt very private, which was nice for me because I don't think I would have wanted an additional kind of like, oh, I feel awkward. I feel like I'm kind of in the way or there's other people around. So I immediately laid down on the bed, and I was probably seen by no less than 5 or 6 nurses. I never signed any paperwork, never told them anything other than my name, and they took care of me immediately. And I don't know whether I was dealing with doctors or nurses. It's hard to tell. But I know that they were very thorough and very knowledgeable of what they were doing. And they asked me a lot of kind of like the symptom questions. They checked my temperature right away, found that I did not have a fever because of the Tylenol, which I explained to them. I did have a fever. It's one of those things that as a sick person, when you're like telling someone how sick you are and they don't see those quantitative measures, you're like, no, I swear I really did have a fever. I just took medicine and now my fever's gone. You know, you have that kind of like song and dance with the person that like you really did have this issue. So they ran what I would consider to be pretty much every test. They couldn't really tell me what they were doing or explain to me in detail the like actual test they were running, but they were able to explain to me in English, we're going to draw your blood, we need some urine, we need this, we need that. They were able to tell me those things. But what the tests were that they were actually performing, I don't know. And honestly, with my husband being in the waiting room, which is where he was allowed to be, which was, I don't know, pretty far away from where I was, and me feeling so poorly, I really wasn't in any position to question them or what they were doing. But whatever they were doing, they seemed pretty in control of it. So they took my blood pressure, like I said, a pretty large blood sample. They catheterized me, which I was not expecting. I've never been catheterized before when I didn't have an epidural, so that was a fun experience. They checked my kidneys. They put me on an IV, which I was not expecting. And then I was a little bit worried that I was going to be there, like they were expecting me to stay the night, because they were hooking me up to an IV. They made me change my clothes, all of that the kind of stuff that you'd expect if you were going to have to be asked to stay the night. They ran all of those tests, like I said, and the blood that they took, they put into these kind of glass vials with this very murky liquid in it, which made it seem like they were kind of performing lab tests or on the spot and were looking for them to change colors or bubble or do something. I don't know. They never explained it to me. But the only odd thing they asked me for that I wasn't expecting was spit. So I would say this is one of the things that I'm pretty terrible at, and I'm not that ashamed to say it, that I am not a good spitter. I never really learned how to do that. I kind of look a lot like Rose in Titanic when she's learning how to spit from Leo DiCaprio's character. That's pretty much me. And so she wanted me to put a decent amount into this what looked like any kind of like specimen cup. And so I just kind of, spit into it, and she was like, no. And then she looked up online what the word that she wanted, which was septum. I've never heard the word septum before. So I had to then look up the English word in English, what it meant. And it's some sort of combination of mucus and spit that you would cough up if you had a respiratory infection like I did. And only unfortunately, I'm just not capable of producing that on the spot. So I had to graciously decline that. But everything else was pretty standard. I'm not going to say it was pleasant by any means. It never really is being poked and prodded in a hospital. But they made it as pleasant as it really could be. So based on that, I was able to provide them with everything they needed. And it turned out that my doctor was actually there helping with the delivery of one of her patients. So she was able to check in on me. And I just really, really like my doctor a lot. She's such a good, warm person and has such a great grasp of the English language. And I might have talked about that a little bit in my last video. But it's just such a great person to rely on when it comes to all of this sort of scary stuff that comes along with being sick and pregnant in a foreign country. So she checked in on me, reassured me that she believes that it was a bacterial infection, and said that she would send some prescriptions to the pharmacy. In true Korean fashion, she then left, and we were left to assume that that meant it was time for us to go. We sat there for about 10 minutes after I got dressed and were just sitting on the bed. I should mention that my husband did come in part of the way through there, and he was perfectly allowed to sit with me and things like that later on. He probably could have done it much earlier on, and we just didn't want to press our luck. So I had him go ask the nurses if it was okay for us to leave, and they were like, yes, go get your prescriptions. And then we had the fun challenge of finding out where the after-hours pharmacy is when the regular pharmacy is closed, because this was at night on a Thursday. So the regular pharmacy had long since closed. So we had to go to the emergency room pharmacy. It is not an interesting enough story for me to tell you here, but there were many elevators, escalators, hallways, parking garages. It was a completely circuitous route that we took. But we eventually found it, eventually got my prescriptions, and eventually went on our way. So that is pretty much the story of me getting a bacterial infection while pregnant here in Korea. I hope that it was in any way useful for you to get a little bit more familiar with how the process works here when you're pregnant. And if not, then I hope it was at least a little bit of a funny story for you to hear. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. And please, as always, let me know if you have any questions in the comments section. And I'd be happy to get back with you as soon as I can with any answers that I might have. So thanks again. I will see you guys next week, and have a great time. Bye-bye.